I'd like to welcome Terry O'Donoghue. To some of us, he's a very familiar name because he's been in the lean game for a very long time. He is a Toyota veteran, and after he allegedly retired, he joined Halfway Toyota, where he's been one of the key people in leading a lean transformation in a dealership or at the dealerships of Halfway Toyota. I should mention he did that together with Dave Brunt from the Lean Enterprise Academy in the UK. Dave has written the book on lean in dealerships, and together they have been instrumental in creating a very remarkable transformation, which is now globally an example of how to do lean in a dealership. And if you want to read more about that, you can go to Planet Lean, which has a number of articles and videos. But what Terry is going to share with us today are his reflections on what must be by now about a 4 or 5 year journey. So as the title indicates, there's struggle and there's learning, and we are very pleased to have Terry share with us his insights and experience. Terry, over to you.
Thanks, Anton. Good afternoon. Some years ago, I heard John Shook start his talk by quoting Paul O'Neill, the CEO of Alcoa. Paul stated his objective for the presentation as, "I want to communicate a few ideas in a clear way that might be helpful to you." That seems to me a good aim to have, and that's what I hope to achieve today. Communicate a few ideas in a clear way that might be helpful to you. I joined the Halfway Group in 2011 after I retired from a 30-year career at Toyota South Africa. My express interest was to apply TPS at the retail level in the motor industry. From the mid-1990s, Toyota South Africa went through a period of rapid change as the increasing investment by Toyota Motor Corporation brought us fully into the Toyota global network. And the implementation of TPS became a core focus in the manufacturing operation and to a lesser extent in the marketing and sales side of the business. I was fortunate to live through that period at Toyota on both the manufacturing and the marketing operations at an executive level, and I learned from some of the masters of TPS that TMC deployed to South Africa. Very little was ever successfully translated into the franchise retail operations, despite the obvious benefits. Joining Halfway was my experiment to see if I could do from inside a retail group what I had not been able to influence from the outside. We've been very fortunate to have the involvement of Planet Lean and Roberto Priolo in documenting the journey we've been on. There are over a dozen articles and videos on Planet Lean that'll give you the detail of the different operations in different parts of the country. And they've all got their own stories and successes. That part of the story has been covered so well and in depth, and I could not match that today. But I can only encourage you to take a look at your leisure at what's really a different kind of transformation. By any measure, it's been successful. But this does not mean that every initiative has been successful, or even that every site has had some success. There's probably more to learn from these other stories than the spotlighted successes. Yeah, much as it was on the long sea voyages that helped identify the importance of vitamins to prevent scurvy, it's often the absence of something that helps us understand its importance. There's the quote from Dan Jones in 2013. And I take that really as a more stringent measure of success of a transformation effort. Dan wrote very specifically about the criteria being focused on the development of those carrying line responsibility to solve their customer problems and develop the capabilities of their team to unblock the flow of value to the customers. The line management and the team members, not the team of experts or specialists, and not as an intervention, but as a transformation. Now, if we use Dan's ideas as the measure of success, then it's a lot harder to feel complacent or even content with the progress we've made at Halfway over the last 8 years. What Dan's getting to is the heart of what's needed, close to that pithy statement from Fujio Cho about the importance of building people before you build cars. In late 2018, Casper Kruger joined Halfway as the CEO of the motor division. As part of his induction, he walked with me in the dealerships. And while Casper had been a colleague of mine at Toyota South Africa and he shared some of that heritage and culture, TPS had never been a focus for him. And this and the retail environment was a new adventure. His comment after the couple of weeks it took us to walk the sites provoked much reflection. After seeing the performance difference between the sites that had made the most progress with their transformation and those that were lagging behind, he asked, "It's so obviously better. Why isn't everyone doing it?" I've been using that question for several months now to try and understand what gets in the way. What stops or hinders the implementation? Why do we struggle to make it everywhere? Today, I want to share what are really personal reflections with you in the hope that they might have some relevance to your journey and maybe give you some food for thought. This is the struggle of the title of this talk. I hope you find some learnings in my struggles. I've picked out 10 such lessons that stand out for this talk today. And it's John Shook's Lean Transformation Framework that we make liberal use of during our journey at Halfway. We know now that the enterprise transformation requires change on 5 dimensions, not 4, not 6. And all 5 of these dimensions must be changed at the same time. And this is true. At Halfway, we often evaluate our efforts and progress directly against this framework. But from my experience, I would say that while all 5 dimensions are important, it's particularly the vertical, the 3 through the middle, from purpose through management behavior to values and basic thinking, that seem to be the most diagnostic in distinguishing our most successful examples from the ones that are less successful. And it's particularly the heart of the framework, that center of the house. The management behavior and systems put in place to support the behavior. These are the things that seem to me to carry a disproportionate weight of the explanation in the differences. Maybe this graphics gets the point across more succinctly. Have a look at that bottom arrow, where the vision and purpose are clearly expressed and coherently rooted in the values and basic beliefs, and the shared vision gives direction to the efforts of all the team, who focus their efforts on the desired outcome. The impact at the tip of this arrow is clearly far greater than the impact at the tip of the top arrow. That top arrow, which can justifiably be labeled normal. Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. Our experiences start here. Time spent building alignment, and mostly you build it by dialogue and listening and involving. This time is seldom wasted and pays huge dividends when you get it right. Lack of alignment is a significant anchor dragger on the implementation and performance. By way of analogy, look at the picture of the French football team, World Cup 2010 in South Africa. It's a team that included Evra, Anelka, Ribéry, and even Thierry Henry at the end there. It's a talented group by any measure. But what was their performance? 0-0 against Uruguay. Lost 2-0 to Mexico. And they even went down 2-1 to South Africa, who were almost 50 places behind them in the rankings at the time. They went home in disgrace after the first round amid acrimony and allegations of revolt. Look at the 2018 version of the French team in Russia. Even with Pogba and Griezmann, can we argue that they are a more talented bunch of individuals than the 2010 team? Did France suddenly develop a different culture in their football over the 8 years? But they got a very different result. Triumph and glory of winning the World Cup, not the disgrace and disgust. The purpose was certainly the same. But was the unity and alignment of values and behavior the same? And where should that have come from? Maybe sometimes you have to face up to the fact that you were just the wrong coach for a particular team. Would Domenech have done much better with the 2018 team? Would Deschamps have done as well as he did if he had had the 2010 team? We'll never know, and it's useless to speculate. But we do know that Domenech was bad with the 2010 team, just as we know that Deschamps was very good with the 2018 team. Sometimes it's just enough to know that you are wrong for that team. The internal arrows don't line up and you can't bring alignment. It comes down to the question of how you judge a coach. And yeah, we all want the silverware, but we know it only comes from the groundwork of building and developing the ability of the players. It is said that Klopp would not have survived 3 years if he had been at Tottenham or Chelsea. What should a coach be focused on? Surely it's producing superior athletes. We face the same dilemma. Do we get this order out today? Or do you build a system that enables you to get 5,000 orders out this year? I don't think benchmarks are very useful. I think comparisons tell you little, except against yourself. You have to look at the work. Can you be better tomorrow than you are today? I think we are indeed our own worst enemies. An issue that we face time and again, and it's usually at the very start of any new effort, is the way we pay our people. It might be specific to the motor retail industry, but measuring and remunerating people based on individual performance, rooted in today's transaction in their functional silo, it's not the smartest way to get people thinking about the horizontal flow of value to the customer across their long-term interaction with the enterprise. But we do it all the time, and great effort needs to be expended to tackle the change. When this is done, progress can be swift. When we falter here, we bog down and we struggle. Remuneration and incentives or commissions are not the only misaligned metric. The motor industry in particular has fallen victim to the misuse of the customer survey. The OEMs drive the CSI measure, be it with Ipsos or JD Powers, and the ranking and the outcome becomes dominant and an end in itself. Focus is lost on the fundamentals of the customer value of quality, right first time, on time, and what it takes to ensure this is achieved. The score and gaming ways to improve the score takes over. You end up with what I refer to as the coffee syndrome. The sprinkles on the cappuccino take precedence over the quality of work as the customer experience is reduced to cute tricks by the barista. On this day, this particular Porsche dealership I visited had 35 vehicles standing on their premises they were unable to fix and return to their owners. But they got good marks for the coffee. That was seen as important to the customer experience. Sorry, we can't fix your car. The way management interface with the work is also definitive. This is Ty, who is a dealer principal at one of the larger sites. He's explaining in an executive review the performance on the parts special orders older than 7 days. This is one of several graphs that Ty will explain during this review. Now, special parts orders older than 7 days is an important measure. It's a factor in the cash-to-cash cycle, and it's often the source of dead stock when not monitored closely. But how much is Ty able to explain, understand, and action from looking at a graph that tracks the monetary value of the special orders older than 7 days? Contrast this with Onka's board on special orders at the Ngami dealership in Maun. Onka's a service advisor who places the special orders for parts that are not normally kept in stock and are needed for this customer's vehicle. Her board is on the side of the cage where the special orders are isolated as they come in, and she monitors by a tally each day. Standing next to Onka, anyone will know exactly what the current state of her special order process is, what she needs to do next, and where the problems are. They'll be able to hear from Onka at a level of detail specific enough to be of some assistance if need be, every day. I'm a huge fan of Edwards Deming, and this is probably my favorite quote from him. So much of management behavior is about merely finding and recording the failures of men. Most often driven by an accountant-dominated approach. But leadership is about much more than exhorting people to try harder. The real test is to remove the causes of failure, to help people do a better job with less effort. How you set up the way you look at metrics and where you look at metrics will determine whether you're recording failure or whether you're in a position to help people solve the problems that they face. Measures must reflect the state of the work, where it happens, as it happens. They're much more useful to keep people focused on solving problems and delivering value than any monthly review of financially based information. The well-known measures of dealerships, the stock ratios, the classifications of movement, the efficiency calculations, idle time, or God help us, the SOOLS reports, and the benchmarks of limited value when you're trying to remove the causes of failure. They embed the existing behavior and they limit Genshi Genbutsu. That is looking with the intent to understand. Unless you revise the way you measure performance and how you review the work, the management role itself will be a barrier to the transformation you seek. It comes down to how you view the role of the leader. Do you see him at the pinnacle of the traditional pyramid, where everything is set up to feed information upwards so that the leader can decide? Or do you see him as the foundation of an organization that is set up to support the frontline workers who serve the customers? The latter is a very different worldview. Top exec support. I think there's seldom any project or initiative that does not list top management support as a prerequisite for success, or it's absent among the list of reasons for lack of success. And yes, there's no arguing that it helps. But not everyone is going to find a Mario Toyotoshi at the helm of a dealership group. Mario, who heads up the largest Canadian Toyota group, puts on an overall and joins the technician in the service bay and says, "Teach me how to do this." That kind of enthusiastic commitment is rare, but it's certainly helpful. But sometimes benign neglect is the best you can hope for. And you can go a long way with benign neglect. See, the enthusiasm for lean transformation is often strongest among the frontline workers. Very seldom is a source of resistance from the front line. Once the measures are aligned and the supportive environment established, the creativity unleashed can be astounding. The real impact of top exec support comes into play when the enthusiastic lean worker runs into resistance from his peers or above him in the hierarchy. The support he gets from above then in overcoming the resistance will determine how far that transformation can go. Lacking the support, the transformation will be limited to that part of the pyramid that the individual is responsible for. You need to establish permission to improve. People can only improve the work when they are granted authority to make the changes to align to the new thinking. But when this is lacking, a departmental head or even a team leader can still achieve a great deal within his own sphere of responsibility. It's the covert hostility that's fatal to transformation efforts. The turf battles, probably the most sensitive and controversial area of any transformation, is when it gets involved in the battles of turf. Call it resistance to change politics, it takes many forms, but it comes down to a struggle for control. It's not uncommon that an open approach involving staff and making things visible arouses the insecurity of some managers. The established order of things and their status and understanding of how things work is being challenged. And it's not every person who deals well with that. In some of our most difficult areas, it has been down to just this difficulty. It can be just one manager in an area or a site who feels that the changes are a threat of some kind, either of status or of his authority. He refuses to grant the permission to change. It's often fatal to the initiative, or it needs a high-level intervention and the explicit expectations of the executive to overcome this impact. This is one area where I'm often forced back on the poorest of solutions: change the person. These difficulties get magnified when you use a lean team of experts to spread and implement the transformation. If you can't keep it as a line responsibility, you're going to come across more and more of these turf battles. Beware the expediter. From Ono, one of the foundations that we use: let the flow manage the process. Don't let management manage the flow. Much of what we have achieved has been rooted in the relentless pursuit of flow. One by one processing drives the need to improve quality to a consistent standard and keeps any deviation clear and obvious. None of this is compatible with expediting. This is Mornay. He ran the fitment operation at our largest dealership. New vehicles fitted with tow bars and safety film based on a customer order at the time of delivery. His operation was regarded as a source of frustration for customers and salespeople. Always late with dubious quality and alarming scrap rates. In 2016, we were following a strategy of centralizing support operations like fitment to create a factory-like industrialization and free up space at the dealership for more retail work. The site I had chosen, which was 3 kilometers from the dealership, became unavailable when it was earmarked for other retail work. And the next best option was a site we owned 29 kilometers away. It was entirely fortuitous and the best thing that could have happened to Mornay and his team. 29 kilometers was too far for the sales manager, who was a compulsive expediter, to interfere with the operation. Mornay and his team now provide an exemplary service to both Gauteng dealerships with consistent quality and hit rates of over 95% in less than half the previous time. Indeed, the Vehicle Preparation Center is the best of the model line examples we have. It's the same team with the same management doing similar work, but they're able to apply the principles without the interference of the ignorant. The more senior the expediter, the more dangerous he is to your operation. I can think of no solution other than to kill him. You have to know the work. If you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. Kobus was one of the first service managers we worked with in Halfway at Toyota Shelly Beach. His was the first site that implemented the Green Bay concept of 2 technicians working on a stream of predictable services and dramatically increased the throughput by more than 300%. He grasped the principles behind TPS quickly and he led his team well. He was a very successful service manager and he had ambitions to be a dealer principal. But the vehicle sales aspect of a dealership is so dominant, it's difficult to reach the dealer principal level without any sales experience. I moved him to Halfway Honeydew as a sales manager, as a step in his development and to facilitate his ambition. I would have done far better to move him as a salesman. Kobus spent 2 years in the wilderness. He was trying to manage people doing work he didn't really understand. Time as a salesman would have given him the chance to build up his knowledge of the work. We were trying to bring a systematic process to a team which had never been explicit about their process, with a process that's difficult to see because it's not that physical. We were trying to do it with a manager who didn't have the experience of the work to be able to contribute to the design of the process. It was one of our least successful experiments. After 2 frustrating years, which did nothing to further his ambition towards promotion as a dealer principal, Kobus returned to the service environment as service manager. He rediscovered his enthusiasm for leading a team and was able to use his deep understanding of the technical environment to launch some of the most innovative experiments we're doing in service. Let's look at those service hours from October to May. Deming might sound a bit harsh saying you don't know what you're doing, but to take a leadership role, you have to have knowledge of the work. You need to understand enough to be able to contribute to the design of the process to ensure an unimpeded flow of value to the customer. If you don't, you have to be able to listen enough to the people who do understand it, to work out how to apply principles to that knowledge and improve the work. One of the most insidious effects of misaligned measures and inappropriate benchmarking is the fear it brings with it to the top performers. Willie's the service manager at Halfway Fourways. He's won the top service award from Toyota South Africa several times. His shop looks exemplary. But Willie struggled to respond to the challenges of continuous improvement. What if I try the experiment and it fails? I've got 2 strong competitors just down the highway. What if I fall behind by trying something that doesn't work? What would it mean if I was no longer number 1 in service? Lean needs you to be brave. You need to have the confidence that a failed experiment is not fatal. Most dangerously, when the metrics you're relying on are not giving a valid reading of your situation. You know, the OEM evaluations, the superficial response not rooted in quality, this attitude that if they haven't complained, it must mean it's good. This fear can result in stagnation, and in time the metrics will catch up with you, and then you won't be number 1 anymore. It goes hand in hand with the previous point, that lean needs a leader to be humble. Facing up to the reality that things might not be as good as you thought they were. The purpose of visualization is to show things as they are and expose the problems. When they are there to see, it demands a mature manager to be able to look and realize that this is where you start from. Sharon led the transformation in our largest Botswana operation in Maun, and she talks about the emotional demands of having to face up to what lean thinking exposed when we first started to work with her, to the point of literally weeping. Seeing things in a new light, with all their warts, is humbling, but it does lay the foundation for the exciting work of solving the problems that have been exposed and building a solid foundation based on eliminating root causes and redesigning the process to bring flow and simplicity and eliminate the waste. Because she was able to be so honest about the start position, Sharon has excelled in leading a transformation that is a model for the country and is spreading lean thinking practice far beyond Halfway's operations in Botswana. Standardization is only standardization when it's done in detail and repeatable. This is the only way to make deviations obvious. It is the only way to build in quality into the work. Now, retail people are not the best at detail. Salespeople are not the best at detail. The retail salespeople who dominate the motor industry management levels often have difficulty with the level of detail that is needed to ensure standards are explicit and protected. The now famous example of the Japanese men's relay team in Rio, where they focused on the hand over the baton to eliminate waste and overcome the disadvantage they had on straight speed. This is an indication of what can be achieved within your limited resources. A 1.28 second improvement on 400 meters translates to about 15 meters at that speed they're running. That's a phenomenal difference just by understanding the detail of the baton change. We stick to basics. We use the spaghetti charts, we use the Yamazumi diagrams, we use the skills matrix. In their handwriting at the workplace, workers will feel confident in changing it if they have written it. You don't type it, and for God's sake, don't laminate it. You'll kill any chance of the team members changing what they've done when they have a better idea. But it is painstaking detail by the second, by the meter. We still use the Kaizen Express. We go back to Deming, we go back to Ono. And you need to ask yourself if you really need to buy the new books. Have you understood and implemented the content of the old ones you bought?
Okay, carry on, Terry.
You also need some luck. It helps if you get the timing right. We started the work at Honeydew in October. Their peak seasonal demand is November and December. And it makes a real impression when you lift a capacity constraint just as the demand surges. It's not such a big deal if you improve capacity and it merely increases the idle time. Create the conditions, solve the real problem. Now what they can see is that it's all about retention. It always was, but they can see now that they've got 50% more space than they need, and they're doing 50% more than they were, and they have the potential with the current resources to increase this to 100% if they can stimulate the demand. Sustainability is the holy grail we're searching for. If it's a transformation, it means it's sustainable. Otherwise, it's just an intervention. An intervention has a life as long as the external energy lasts. Sustainable means the energy is generated from within. This slide's in Portuguese. It comes from a visitor we had from Brazil, Ricardo Costin, who has a Volvo dealership there. And prompted by a Planet Lean article, he came to visit Sharon in Maun. This slide is from his report back to his staff on what he saw at the visit. I especially like the obsessio, translated as obsession. An obsession does seem to encapsulate what I think is needed to keep the progress. An obsession with flow, an obsession with visualization, an obsession with standardization, and an obsession with frugal improvements is what Ricardo saw. The people who are making the most progress, doing the most innovative and impactful things, and trying the most creative experiments are the people who have an obsession for lean and continuous improvement. You can't give people motivation. I have my doubts if you can even inspire motivation. It's a self-generated thing that comes from within. It's stimulated by success, but it is individual and particular to each person. You may, like Elron and Jake, see it as a mission from God, or maybe not, but something pretty close to that distinguishes the most ardent and committed practitioners we have in Halfway and our associated friends we've come across on our journey. No working environment has to be toxic. We can change that. As Deming said, pride in work is possible. So do we have a formula for success? No, I think it's more of an approach. There is a sequence we generally follow. We always start with the work, look at the work. We try to understand the mix of work. The objective is to get flow. You can only get flow where the work is predictable. So first, separate predictable work from the unpredictable. Predictable work can be put into flow. The benefits of one-by-one flow are so dramatic. They create the conditions for people to want to continue the efforts. You can later get to know how to make work that is currently unpredictable more predictable. Once you can create a separate stream for the predictable work, a green stream if you like, you can use the lean tools to develop the standard work. Once the standard is set and documented, the visualization of gaps can initiate the PDCA cycle, and this forms the foundation for the development of the problem-solving capability of the team members. It's the problem-solving capability that will determine the long-term success of the continuous improvement efforts. Nothing sustainable is achieved by instructing team members to change to a better process. Nothing sustainable is achieved even if you show them how to improve the process. Even showing people how to eliminate waste will not take them to a place where problem solving dominates. You only build problem solving capability by solving problems. Building problem solvers is the objective. That means solving problems, not implementing other people's solutions. Struggling with the problem and how to solve it is where the learning and development happens. Guiding people through the process of problem identification, data analysis, developing a hypothesis, and then designing an experiment to test their hypothesis is the only way to help them learn in a way that helps them play the continuous improvement game. It's not about compliance and audit. It's about the development of a skill, learning to see a gap and responding to it by working out how to prevent it occurring again. There can be no rollout. You learn from your own struggle. Learning problem solving is more important than solving a problem. But look at the picture on the left. The youngster still has to get his feet in position, his head in the right place, the flex in his knees and his hands ready. You can see the ball is going to go straight through his legs. He'll learn how to make all the adjustments and put it all together to build his skill, but it takes practice. The coach obviously knows how to play. He's teaching from a basis of experience and understanding. That demands a lot more of a coach than a policing approach. Finding and recording the failures. Punishing people who try things that don't succeed. It's not about having the answers. It's about having the questions that can prompt the thinking needed to find the answers. This is what Dan was emphasizing in the 2013 quote we started with. Developing the capabilities of line managers and their teams to unblock the flow of value creation. Building people before we build cars. Flow and visualization. You do it so you can see the problems, so you can solve the problems. From Denise Bennett a number of years ago in Cape Town. We took the message, make the work visible, make the process visible, make the progress visible, make the problems visible, make the measures visible. You only measure so you can make it visible. Visibility is to provide the feedback, so you can see the gaps, so that you can start to eliminate the gaps. If you're not going to take action to eliminate the gaps, i.e. solve the problem, don't bother to measure. Conclusion, it's not rocket science, but just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. Aligning the management behavior and systems to support the frontline transformation is still a work in progress for us at Halfway. But getting the center of the house right is the most important problem we need to address. The answer to Casper's question lies in the middle of the house. So what's your management system? What behaviors are required? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Terry. I have to say that we've heard a few rare gems based on your experience. Thanks very much. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. I'll start with the questions by Andrew and David on both on training. What level of training was given to the frontline teams? Then did the lean training include all at the dealership? And how much was done before the first steps were taken?
I'm not trying to be glib when I say none. The training happens at the workplace. We do use some games, some simulations, particularly around flow and the importance of flow. We don't do, certainly we haven't up till now, we don't do across the board the entire dealership. I generally start in the service area and particularly in the wash bay. Most often because the wash bay is very physical work that everyone can understand. It has a very short cycle, so you can repeat often and you can see the impact of the adjustments you make as you test your various hypotheses and do experiments. So we go from the wash bay to the green stream on service to the more complex work in service. And we do that for a while before we start going into the vehicle side, where we almost always start in the preparation. It's very difficult to see the work of the sales interface without influencing it. Not many people can conclude their negotiation with their salesperson and the F&I with an observer sitting looking at them. So we tend to try and do it from a distance. So we'll start with the physical work as much as we can. The training is done at the workplace in small groups, and it's done by doing. You learn by doing. We will immediately start people observing their colleagues. We use video extensively. It's just made it so much easier to do things like spaghetti charts, and we build from the bottom up. It always takes longer than you think. You think you don't have time to do this? Well, guess what? It's going to take you years longer than you think at this stage you don't have time for. It does take time to build if it's going to stick.
Terry, thanks again. If any of you want to ask a question, then you can also click on the raise hand button and I'll give you a chance to speak directly to Terry. But meanwhile, in the chat, Julie has asked, well, firstly, thank you for a great presentation. And then she asks, how have you changed department remunerations to align with lean? This is an industry that's completely driven by commissions.
It is. Our first point of attack, and we haven't been successful everywhere, but where we've got it right, we switched to a team-based remuneration. There is still pay for performance, but instead of having individuals competing with each other to grab the work that's most likely to give them the best performance, we reward the team. What you often find, particularly in the service area, is if technicians get rewarded by the hours they sell, your senior technicians very often start to dominate the planning process and they undermine the controller who's making the decisions. So they start grabbing the easy work because that gets them their commission, and they leave the apprentice with the difficult work to struggle because he doesn't have the status to change it. By changing it to a team-based remuneration, they either all get or no one gets. You very quickly find the team where the senior people not only take the work that they're most capable of doing because it has the biggest impact, but they pay a lot more attention to helping the juniors overcome their problems. So where we've done that successfully, we have taken out that difficulty of people losing sight of the customer value and doing more things for their personal value and the achievement of their commission. Because the fundamental we're after is customer value.
Thanks again. So a question from Andrew, was this effort only Terry or were there consultants involved?
We don't ever use that word. I'm definitely not a consultant, and I definitely wouldn't use a consultant. Consultant conjures up all sorts of images for me. It is by nature an external intervention. I am more than happy to learn from anyone, and I have learned from lots of people I've engaged with, and I've brought people in to participate in what we are doing, but not as a, you can't do lean to people. You have to help people learn how to follow lean thinking themselves. And that to me is what gives me the problems with consultants who have very often a solution they're going to roll out. Something that worked before that they've come to implement. So no, we don't use consultants. As Anton mentioned at the beginning, Dave Brunt has been with us a large part of this journey. And my colleagues within Halfway, I can name half a dozen who would be exemplary leaders of any lean transformation effort in any setting because of the work they've done and what they have learned in doing it. So it goes way beyond just Terry.
Thank you. So Jeff says, awesome, thank you. I've made some notes and will revisit and research. I think that's a complimentary that he's going to take the trouble to investigate further. And then he asks, can you talk to OEE and whether that was a part of what you did at Halfway?
Just help me with OEE as he sees it.
Overall equipment effectiveness,
Okay.
Looking at losses in a structured way.
I am no fan of Six Sigma, and I don't get into that level of intense measuring. But availability of resources is fundamental to standardization. If you don't make sure the lifts work, if you don't make sure that the tools in the cabinet are there when the man reaches for the number 11 spanner, you cannot hope to stick to your standard process in the standard time. It's the responsibility of management to make sure that the resources are both available and working to be able to deliver the output the system's designed for. We've got this entirely archaic throwback in the motor industry that the technicians are responsible for their own tools. An artisan must own his tools. That leads you to a point where you're always having to audit the toolbox. Because if the technician loses a tool, who knows when he goes and replaces it? In the meantime, he's borrowing from the bay next door, or worse, pinching from the area down the passage. So one of the things we certainly do is standard tools owned by the dealership, allocated to the workers. The availability of resources is vital, but not at the, we've never gone to the extent of the Six Sigma measuring.
Okay, so Terry, here's one more from Gillian. She says, you've really highlighted the value of reflecting not just on what works, but more importantly, why things don't work. Can you explain about what you mean when you say that rollouts don't work?
Okay. To me, the whole point of developing people, from that quote, Dan Jones, that I started with, it's developing the capabilities of the people. Developing their capabilities means helping them develop their problem solving. And the only way to develop problem solving is to solve problems. I'm very keen on showing people. We have our model lines. We take people to visit between the dealerships and the different businesses. We go and look, you steal with your eyes. But if you take a solution and say, this works, we did it in Scottsboro, we're now going to do it in Cape Town, you've just robbed all those people in Cape Town of the opportunity to learn and develop their problem solving. I think problems change. They change with the site, they change with the customer base, they change with the demand levels, they change with the equipment available. It's far more important to me that you learn how to solve problems than that you solve a problem. Learning how to solve the problem is what you're trying to coach.
Question from Nikash. You spoke of the servant leadership model. What were your main challenges in the implementation of this model? Yeah.
It may be particular to retail, but customers get in the way. Customers walk right in and they come up to your desk. I found it far easier when I was in the middle of a factory and there were all sorts of security guards and fences that kept people away while you got on with your work. That doesn't happen in retail. Something goes wrong and you have the person standing in front of you. That often prompts that immediate response that I've got to solve this problem now. And that doesn't sit well with status and authority. I'm the dealer principal. I've got a customer. He's upset. He's in front of me now. He wants a solution. I'll give him a solution. The customer goes away. You've achieved something. But have you achieved anything in terms of preventing the occurrence of that kind of problem? Do you ever go back and do the reflection on what led to that problem? Where were the root causes? What can you redesign in your process? You know, Demings and his red beads experiment. If you don't take the red beads out the box, you will continue to get the variation inherent in the design. Trying to get leadership to see their role as supportive rather than problem solving is a huge challenge at retail. Mostly because of the time pressures people often feel because the customer's standing right in front of them.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question from Keith. To support the lean approach, what systems, IT systems, have Halfway implemented? Are there multiple or single systems, and what would one look for in a system to support lean?
That now you get me onto another whole evangelical bend. The systems, the IT systems that go into any operation are very often the inhibitors of continuous improvement. People can see things in their work that they could make better, but very often the systems that they're working with restrict them, so they end up having to work around. So you have the system and then you have the workarounds, and over time the workarounds multiply, and that's not compatible with standardized work. Where I think the most exciting field is, and when I get most enthusiastic about what we can do, is the era of codeless programming. There are products now where you don't have to be a specialist designer or IT or a programmer. You can, what we refer to as, be a citizen developer, a line function, where as part of your work, you develop the IT infrastructure that supports your work. because you develop it, you can change it, and it can keep pace with your improvements. And some of the most exciting work we've done in the last 12 months has been around our use of NAC and how we are trying to develop people to take control of their work and be able to embed the improvements in the work in the standards of the IT support. There's a long way to go, and the accountants certainly have the horrors when we start talking like this. And you have to balance the governance and the reliability of systems. But I think there's a huge opportunity to put the development of the information infrastructure and build it into the work, rather than having this parallel universe where people work from documents and capture things in parallel to the people doing the physical work.
Okay, so Terry, firstly, there are many thank yous in the chat, and from our side, the Lean Institute Africa, thanks very much as well for sharing your deep experience. And I should add that Halfway Toyota have also been very generous in allowing us to organize study visits to the various branches of Halfway. So once again, thanks very, very much. If anybody wants to learn more, you're more than welcome to contact us at the Lean Institute Africa. And with that, goodbye. The recording will be available soon. Bye then.
Thanks, Anton. It's about trying to make the world a better place, so we'll share with anyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Terry.